Press report. Great. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this press conference where we are going to respond to the Montgomery County's Council's media availability this morning. I'm going to start with Nicole Williams.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Williams, and I am a concerned Montgomery County resident. What I want to talk about today is the racial equity lens. Basically, the claim that 5G will bridge the digital divide has been refuted by the Communications Workers of America and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. This is testimony of Angela Cipher, Executive Director, National Director Inclusion Alliance, before the United States House of Representatives Subcommittee on Communications and Technology Committee on Energy and Commerce. This is a quote. "The excitement around 5G has led to claims 5G will solve the digital divide. It will not. Current broadband technologies were not deployed to all neighborhoods unless local governments mandated such. And there is no reason to think 5G will be any different. Additionally, 5G as a broadband service will require 5G capable devices. Low-income households struggle to pay for internet service, will certainly not rush out to purchase a 5G enabled device. Furthermore, and I'll add, ZTA 1907 has no guarantees for affordable maintenance to fix equipment that breaks. There's no education on how to use the computers being provided. How can a council make a genuine effort to bridge the digital divide without considering everything that causes the digital divide? Also, if the county council is truly committed to equity, they would look at ZTA 1907 through the lens of Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, Bill 2719, which was sponsored by Nancy Navarro and co-sponsored by all the council members. Why won't they do that analysis? Something else that concerns me is that these 5G millimeter wave industrial strength antennas will be placed in areas that, other workers won't be aware of. For example, what about those who mow your lawn, or your mailman that sits there and sorts mail in their car, sitting right under these items that field technicians and utility workers get to have turned off before they do their jobs? So residents and just, unknowing workers will not have the same luxury, and it's just not fair. And we really need to do some critical thinking where this is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I was quite shocked to read the Maryland Matters op-ed that was put forward saying that the reason for this digital divide is so that people would not be left behind. It is absolutely outrageous that a racial equity statement has not been done. There's absolutely no data documenting that this will help those who are unconnected in our community. And I just find it quite outrageous. So one of the things we wanted to do today was go over in a sort of a myth fact format what is being said about the ZTA, which is going to be voted on tomorrow morning, and it will allow the telecoms to put cell towers, short cell towers, within 30 feet of homes, no notice and no hearings. It is a corporate giveaway. It is an absolute subsidy to industry. We have a lot of people to speak today. Janice Artucci, I can see you there. Would you like to talk about the media availability and any statements about what you would like to share with the press and with the community?
Certainly. My name is Janice Artucci. I'm with the Parents Coalition of Montgomery County, Maryland. In our group, we've been tracking the construction and placement of cell towers at public school playgrounds for about 10 years. So we have a lot of experience with the process and how these cell towers are constructed. So I have been monitoring what's going on with the 5G zoning text amendment because it does impact schools. These placements will also be in and around schools. And we've seen cell towers dictate the construction of public school buildings. So your example of that is Wheaton High School, where a cell tower was placed on the football field. And a few years later, when they decided to modernize the building and tear it down, the new building had to be built around the existing cell tower. So these are permanent structures that affect the way our communities look and feel. So with that in mind, I had found an article about Aspen, Colorado, who actually enacted some aesthetic guidelines for their 5G residential cell towers. And I sent that to the council this morning. At the media availability today, Kate Ryan from WTOP brought up that issue of aesthetics and what the council was doing to control the aesthetics of the 5G towers in our county. And surprisingly, we got a response from council member Gabe Albanaz, and his response was that the 5G installations in Montgomery County on residential streets will go on existing poles, that the ZTA is not going to allow the poles to be replaced. Well, I pulled up the ZTA and read it, and it's in about the first paragraph. It talks about the replacement of towers, and we know that's true because the equipment needed to be put on a tower is heavier. It has some weight to it. It has some requirements for construction. You can't just go and sit it on a simple street lamp that we see in many, many Montgomery County residential neighborhoods where all the utilities are underground and they have a very simple, I can send you a picture of one in Hampshire Greens that I put out on Twitter today, a very simple pole with a little lamp shade on top, and that's it. There's no place on that structure for the addition of any equipment, and it's not designed to take on any weight. In fact, what we learned about this when this was being discussed in the city of Gaithersburg is that the poles that we normally see in our neighborhoods, many of the poles are designed to be breakaway. They break away, so if you drive your car into it, the pole will fall down, collapse, whatever, and it won't kill everybody. We know that doesn't happen with the 5G cell towers or with any cell towers. They're built on sturdy structures. So these will be sturdy structures that go on the edges of our streets. We also know up in the city of Gaithersburg, one of the plans was to replace stop signs with 5G cell towers. So these are the kind of questions that people have in their neighborhoods. We've seen it come up before. And so my very simple question to the council today was, what are they doing about, dealing with the aesthetics? And the response from council member Albanaz that they would not be replacing any poles was shocking and stunning and probably horrifying, since he's an at-large council member. And it makes me feel like he really doesn't know our neighborhoods across the county, our schools, our parks, our homes, and doesn't realize that in fact, what he's voting on tomorrow will allow for the replacement of existing street lamps on our residential streets. So that's what we got out of today's press conference.
I was shocked that that was stated because that is absolutely unfactual. We're talking about replacing, just to be clear for everyone, with what you just laid out, we are talking about replacing the street lights and the utility poles with new poles, which are going to be thicker and wider and taller to carry the antennas. And if what we have already means anything, they are ugly and not properly even done according to what the permit is putting forth that they should look at. You just go to Brickyard Road where she's had that installation. They didn't even put a shroud on it, even though it said there should have been a shroud covering up to make it look less antenna-like. So Susan, are you on the call?
Again on
And if anyone has questions, you can put questions in the chat. Susan, great. Thank you so much, Janice.
Hi. I also was appalled by, I have been appalled by the level of generalization that the council members have used when they're describing the ZTA. They seem to think it can mean anything that they want it to at the moment. But when you read the ZTA, it really matters that municipalities are cut out of the process of commenting on and having input and even hearing about cell towers that will go in their municipalities, in their neighborhoods, in their rights of way. It cuts out of the process people's voices and residents' input. It also is going to reduce the ability of, are you hearing an echo on the on this call?
I'm not.
You're not, okay, just a second. It reduces the ability of a neighborhood and a community to decide what it looks like, what it wants to have sell what it wants to have in front of homes. And we all know that it will reduce property values when you put cell antennas on cell poles in front of homes. So there are a lot of things that need to be looked at better. They haven't been. We feel like this is being rushed through. We don't understand why the rush. And we have a number of council members who have values where they really do seem to care about climate impact, and they seem to care about racial equity and social justice. Yet we know that this piece of this zoning ordinance is being pushed through without an analysis of climate impact and without an impact statement for racial equity and social justice. That's specifically going to go. We know that there's legislation that goes into effect in September where there would be that analysis. So I'm hoping that the council members will take actions that are more in line with their stated values. I hope that tomorrow they will really listen to the residents who've spoken in over 1,500 letters to them, and who've spoken to them individually and at municipalities. I know my municipality has asked to schedule this vote in September. And we think that it will give more time for us to have input and to see what's going to happen with it. So we hope that you'll look carefully, because there is no technical requirement that a cell antenna transmitting 5G signal needs to be 30 feet from a home to provide that signal. And we have a lot of 5G signal coming from low band and mid band 5G in our county. You can look at any coverage map. Despite the claims of council members that we don't have it yet, it's completely out of line with the reality that we do. So we have a lot of 5G service already, and there's just one additional type that even the companies themselves say we do not need to be that close to deliver that signal. So let's look closely at what's happening here and not just listening to the generalizations of council members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm just thankful to have Professor Paul Ben-Ishai here from Ariel University, who is a physicist and wrote a letter to the council documenting the scientific reasons why not just companies should be in charge of putting cell antennas in neighborhoods. And I would like you to, and thank you so much for joining us. I know it is late. And if you could share about your letter, what you said, and we want it on the record in every way. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I should be happy to. Basically, first of all, I'm a physicist, as you said. I'm the head of the Dielectric and Terahertz Laboratory in Ariel University. But that means that my speciality is understanding how matter interacts with radio waves. So I'm quite eminently placed to talk about this. Quite simply, small cells are transmitting usually between 6 watts to 10 watts, which means at a distance of 30 feet from a bedroom, because they would be basically at the height of a second-story building, you'll be exposed from a single antenna to about 0.3 watts per square meter. Now, that doesn't sound very much, but it's actually quite high. It is certainly higher than the standards allow in Switzerland, where quite recently an expert group, I'll just give you the name, the Berenis group, who advises the Swiss government on electromagnetic radiation and its aspects with human health, state this is way too high and should be reduced. There is no really good technical reason why they have to be that close. The small cells antennas can work perfectly well from distances of up to 300 yards, even up to 1,000 yards, especially if they are transmitting at those sort of power levels. There's only one reason I can actually think of why a cell phone company would want to place an antenna that close. It's because they're looking to the high band 5G, and to make their lives much easier, they can then simply replace what is mid-band small cells with actual high band small cells without too much trouble or inconvenience to themselves. As I stated in my letter to the Sentinel, there is plenty of scientific evidence of the deleterious effect of electromagnetic radiation on us coming from cell phones. It is insidious. It affects our public health, and the allowed exposure rates as they stand today are far, far too high. This is not going to improve with 5G. This is actually going to get worse. There's another point that I would also like to point out. To make 5G work, you need to make a densification of the antennas. That means you need many, many, many more. Something like 1 every 50 yards when you're talking about the high band. This means its energy consumption is extremely high. So much so that the existing 5G networks in China are actually closed at night to save electricity. So if you are environmentally minded and you would like to do something about climate control, 5G is not the way to go. The other point I think is very important to state is that 5G is being given by companies who exist for profit. They don't exist for anything else. The service they give a good service for profit. The average 5G enabled phone is extremely expensive, and that's not going to change. So it is perfectly obvious to believe that the first place they will put their antennas in the rich neighborhoods, not in the poor neighborhoods. They will not invest in poor neighborhoods to bridge the digital divide in any sense or form, because it's more profitable to put them in the rich neighborhoods. So no, it doesn't meet that declared aim that Nicole pointed out. Definitely not. The health effects are delicious, as I said. I think you will see a rise in cases of electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which is something real and affects probably about 3% of the population. That can be a lot of people. So I think this ordinance is not just poorly conceived, it is verging, in my mind, on criminal.
Thank you, Professor Paul Ben-Ishai. I appreciate you stating that. And actually, Dr. Deborah Davis is here with us today also to speak, and I think we'll be speaking to impacts to not only humans, but bees, trees, and birds. And you raised a very important point, which I want to point out, which is that the Montgomery County Council itself actually did a modeling of the radiation and found that the plume went out 10 feet from the small cell installation, that if it had 3 and carriers on it, or 3 antennas, they called it a worst case scenario. And that 10 feet plume, of course, who is in that 10 feet plume? Let's pretend like FCC limits were safe or they were somehow adequate. You have tree limbs, birds, bees, bats, insects, pollinators, and none of that is being addressed by the council. So Dr. Deborah Davis, thank you so much for joining us today. And I would love for you to address what the council is saying. Some members of the council are also saying that our federal agencies are assuring safety and that they've looked at all the science.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Let me start out with saying that the federal agencies are behind the times. They lack the staff and the personnel and the training to answer this question. So if you look at more balanced assessments that have been conducted lately, including the one that Dr. Ben-Ishai just referred to by the Swiss National Expert Group, they have concluded that current standards are not positioned to protect public health or the environment. Let me start out with something that was said earlier by Susan Kahn. The 5G impacts on energy and climate are real and important and have not been fully taken into account. Specifically in China, as Dr. Ben-Ishai indicated, they are turning off the 5G antennas at night because it is an energy hog. 5G antennas use 3 to 10 times more energy than 4G antennas. That is a fact. And that has led the Chinese to turn off their antennas at night. In addition, they've turned them off because they found that even with the growing Chinese middle class, which is the largest in the world, people are not inclined to spend the additional money to purchase new routers, new computers, new refrigerators, new coffee pots that are all 5G enabled. And as Nicole Williams indicated, there's a huge problem here with economic disparities, because those people who are supposedly going to be bridging the digital divide In order to bridge it, you'll need new devices. You'll need to spend the money on them and invest in them. And that is hardly going to bridge the huge gap that we now have, the digital divide. With respect to birds and bees, I've published a machine learning analysis with an Australian scientist in a peer-reviewed journal, Malka Halgamug, in which we found that the preponderance of studies show clear impacts on trees. And most recently, scientists working in the government of Belgium and scientists working for the industry have produced modeling studies on honeybees. And they have shown clear evidence that there will be impacts on honeybees that could be devastating. Now, we know that honeybees are responding all over the world to neonicotinoid pesticides, but the impact of electromagnetic fields from growing radiation plumes has never been taken into account. Basically, what the 5G system is a huge marketing system that has not been fully tested. And we need to take a step, take the moment to evaluate what really is being pressed here and ask ourselves a question. Why did Swiss Re, before the pandemic, conclude that 5G was off the leash, out of control, and therefore Swiss Re, one of the world's largest secondary insurance firms, refused to cover 5G as from any health and environmental impacts? That's a very important thing. If you cannot get insurance for the impacts of 5G, and you as a county are now putting these things up, then you're going to be liable for the costs that will be incurred when the damages start to accrue. And again, as Professor Paul Benishai showed in his letter published in the Sentinel, there are a substantial body of evidence documenting these effects on subtle biological processes that are considered important and predictive of the increased risk of cancer and other things. We do not know why young adults in the United States today are getting 4 times more rectal cancer. Young adults under the age of 40, according to the Centers for Disease Control and the National Cancer Institute, are developing 4 times more rectal cancer in the past decade. This is a big problem. And one of the things that needs to be looked into more carefully, as my colleagues and I published in a recent peer-reviewed article, is the role of keeping wireless devices close to the body. And with these antennas, exposures to this kind of radiation will be more generally increased in the environment. And studies in India have shown damage to the DNA of people living closer to antennas at the current levels. So we need to rethink our policies on siting. Certainly in Israel and France, it would be illegal to have a cell antenna in the middle of a school and to build a school around an antenna. It would be against the law in these high-tech countries. What are we doing to our children here? Those are the questions that I hope the council will think about when it considers what to do in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for coming on and joining us today. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I really appreciate you sharing this information with the community. I'd like to add, in response to what you were talking about with trees, birds, and bees, that Washington, D.C., well, first let me say this. The council stated that they have an amendment to deal with protecting the trees. However, their amendment simply pushes it off into another time frame when there are leasing or other, when deals have been made, rather than doing what other communities are doing. So for example, in Washington, D.C., small cell towers cannot be located within 15 feet of a tree, and trees can't be pruned for the benefit of small cell infrastructure. It states very clearly that no street tree shall be removed or have its protected root zone impacted to accommodate installation of small cell infrastructure. And instead, in Montgomery County, a absolutely inadequate statement about, well, later that they will look at what the protections might need to be, or something that is just unconscionable when it comes to trees. So I think we can really do better. And it is very unfortunate that this morning in the press media availability, that was put forward as if there were protections for trees when they are not in there. And I'm shocked, as I know many people are. If people have questions, please put them in to the chat. Paul, you wanted to say something about the modeling, if you'd like to.
Yes. I know the scientific literature quite well on modeling for 5G. I don't know of any particular studies where they modeled an entire street. And I would be very, very skeptical about any claim that they made some modeling to truly check what the exposure levels would be. I would find that very, very difficult. The modeling that's been done when you look at the literature is modeling inside buildings mainly. Modeling in hypothetical situations of one person getting a directed beam, modeling of the SAR values. I have never yet seen in the literature modeling of an entire street and the exposure from set numbers of cell phone antennas. I would like to see that study very, very much.
Yeah, this wasn't a whole street. In fact, it was absolutely inadequate. What they did is they said, to what degree is the FCC non-compliant zone and where is the compliant zone around a cell installation? So it was that very basic RF simulation where they have the different colors, and they said it goes out 10 feet, worst case scenario, where it will be non-compliant with FCC limits. And
this is one of the problems that I find with these sort of studies. They're thoroughly unrealistic. If you know a little bit about wave propagation of RF, which is what I deal with, these waves go out. If they hit anything, they bounce back. Part goes through, part is absorbed, but part bounces back. And very much like you see the waves in the sea when they hit the beach and they hit obstacles on the beach and they're reflected back one onto the other, you begin to get the formation of hotspots, standing wave phenomena. You get exactly the same with radio waves. You get exactly the same with cell antennae. To state that you have looked at one antenna and you've seen its plume come out, and then say this means everything is going to be fine for a street which may have up to, I don't know, 20, 30 of these antennas, if they want to put them that close, is ludicrous. I'm trying to think of a suitable analogy. It's like, I don't know, stating that if you have a model car and it crashes into a wall, then all big cars are going to be fine. It is thoroughly inadequate. It will not model what really happens. So I imagine that in the real time scenario, and by the way, there are some exposure readings taken from China about to see how this can actually happen when it comes to real time. But I imagine that when you model real time, proper time, the exposure levels that a person will be subject to will be far higher than those from a single plume coming from a single antenna on a single pole in an imaginary street on an imaginary pole.
thank you, Professor Benishai. I would like to add to what you're saying that in other countries, it would be illegal to do some of the things that are happening in the United States. In fact, I just got word that in Brussels, Belgium, where they had much more restrictive laws around what is allowed for human exposure, they have changed their limits to accommodate 5G, because in order to put in the 5G along with the 4G densification, to put in all of this small cell infrastructure, they literally have to change countries' more restrictive limits, because the radiation levels will be so much higher near the antennas and so much closer to where people are. So when you hear that this is going to be lower radiation, it's astounding. It is absolutely not true.
I think I published a blog in layman's language to explain what happens with 5G. The estimation I had was that a typical 5G rollout in an American neighborhood would lead to a 6-fold increase in exposure to ambient radiation. So if the normal figures are about 0.1 watt, they'll go up to 0.6. And in fact, I think they'll go much, much, much higher.
Let me add something, if I may. We know that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We know that the Cleveland Clinic advises men who want to have healthy babies to get phones out of their pockets. And they do that because of experimental and human studies that show that current levels of wireless radiation can damage sperm. That is established. We know from testimony provided just a week or two ago to the European Parliament by Fiorella Belpoggi and Arno Thielens that there is strong evidence showing that this radiation can damage reproduction. Now, we have an unexplained infertility problem around the world today. 1 in 5 couples that wants to have a healthy baby is unable to do so when they choose to do so. That's a huge problem, and it's growing. And to continue to expose ourselves to this sort of radiation when we do not have adequate information on safety and when we have growing reasons for concern seems a very foolish thing. And I would have to say that this is a betrayal of public health that is about to happen. And I urge the council members to rethink what they're about to do, to recognize that there's a growing body of science. We can make this available to the council. These are written reports prepared for the European Parliament by some of the world's top experts, Professor Fiorella Belpoggi and Arno Thielens. And Professor Thielens has worked with and for the telecom industry. So this is the latest information that we can provide, and it would be foolish to ignore it. And please understand, over the past 4 years, the US government has been hamstrung because of lack of resources across the board, particularly in public health. CDC was decimated. And one of the consequences of that is that the government itself now has very few people inside that are truly experts in bioelectromagnetics. The FCC lost its most able staff member a few years ago and has not replaced him. The EPA wiped out its program of research in this field, unfortunately, more than a decade ago. And so to rely on the federal government, which itself has been under fire and does not have the expertise to provide it, is foolish. And then to ignore the National Toxicology Program findings, which were originally commissioned by the FDA, and which said that current studies that they just completed, the largest, most well-funded, most well-conducted study ever carried out in the world, shows clear evidence of cancer being caused by radiation from microwave devices. This study is important and should not be dismissed and downplayed and ignored in the interest of rolling out, and in fact, steamrollering this technology.
Thank you. The council members have been actually putting forward that the FDA, the CDC, the EPA, the American Cancer Society, the NCI, and the World Health Organization are all assuring safety. And we have been trying to give them the factual information documenting that that is not true. And it's not a matter of opinions. It's actually unfactual to say that they say it is safe. What they do is, it gets a little dicey as to what they do, but the question that everyone needs to ask is, show me the latest report that looked at all the science and said, is this safe or is it not? And you looked at both reproductive damage, brain damage, impacts to trees, bees, birds. You looked at all of those things and you decided that this was safe or not safe. That has never been done. There is no report. It doesn't exist.
In fact, to elaborate, what they say is that we don't have enough evidence to conclude that there is a problem or not. Now, the lack of evidence should not be confused with proof of safety. I think that those of us speaking to you today as scientists say that we do have evidence, and that evidence has been amassed by our colleagues in Europe, where the industry is not quite as influential as it is in this country, where the lobbying from the telecom industry is greater than that from pharma, from any other as well. And the fact of the matter is, we have been spoken to now by people inside this industry who understand that 5G is chiefly a marketing plan, that the reality of it is it has not been ever tested and evaluated fully, and it's intended to create a demand so that people will want to buy the latest product, just like they want the latest sneakers, they'll want the latest phones and devices, and people will sometimes spend more on their devices than on food and medicine. And we know that that's a huge problem across the board. So I thank you for putting together this discussion, and I hope the council members will understand that there's a substantial and growing body of scientific evidence indicating that there are serious problems, and that what the US government says is not that this is safe, but that we need more studies. And yet the call for studies, which has gone on since 1999, 2002, 2010, 2012, 2014, the GAO repeatedly says we need more studies. But instead of getting more studies, we get more calls for studies. And that really should end.
Thank you. Right. And the latest WAMU piece, and now we're going to pivot into legal issues, but this is an important aspect. The WAMU piece stated that the World Health Organization, doesn't say that there's a problem. However, just putting on top of what you just said, Dr. Davis, there is no report that has looked at everything. For these organizations like the CDC, which has web pages drafted by an industry consultant, there are not CDC experts who got together and even looked at the science, all of the science, to come up with a systematically developed opinion on what it means. Not been done. They brought in a subject matter expert who is a known industry-funded scientist. And the World Health Organization has the EMF project, which is led by one person. There's no oversight. And there's a fact sheet online that unfortunately is convincing the world over that there's no problem, even though the World Health Organization states on their website that they have not done a monograph, the EMF project, I should say, since 1993. So if you haven't looked at the science since 1993, how can it even be stated that they even have an opinion? But these opinions are being put forward. Now, the International Agency for the Research on Cancer, which is a separate entity of the World Health Organization, by the way, we're talking about two different entities, they do not have a nice little short little fact sheet online. Instead, they have a large monograph put out in 2013, as well as a press release in 2011, when they decided, this independent vetted group of experts decided that this radiation was a possible carcinogen. However, the research base has increased since then with the National Toxicology Program study, Ramazzini and many others. And now many of the scientists who were World Health Organization advisors who were participated in that review are saying that it is a probable, if not proven, many are saying proven, and that the evidence is strong that it is a carcinogen. Only actually cancer causing, as you always talk about, is not the only, it's actually pales compared to some of the other issues that are being addressed. And I know Peter Kahn is waiting and some other people to speak. So I want to segue into the legal aspects here. But one of the things, Environmental Health Trust and 13 other petitioners have a game-changing lawsuit against the FCC, calling on them to, stating that they violated the law in determining that our federal safety limits, which were set in 1996, based on research from the 80s and previous, that those are don't need to be changed. Now, previous to that, Montgomery County had a lawsuit challenging the FCC's rules, which would streamline 5G and small cell infrastructure, which is exactly what the council is saying that they have to do because the FCC is making them do it. They challenged it, saying, how can you force us to put these small cells up when you haven't even reviewed the research, figuring out if it's even safe or not? What about the people? What about the children in our community? Now, that case was determined to be moot because the FCC then said, well, there's no reason to change their limits. Just follow me because this is important. And then EHT and 13 other petitioners then challenged that. My point being, if we win, and we don't know for sure, but we do expect a decision coming in the next few weeks. If we do win this case, Montgomery County's case will no longer be moot. So it was wrong and unfactual of the Montgomery County council person to say in the media availability that the legal issues have been dealt with. It was one of many unfactual or half-truths or whatever we want to call it, just absolutely incorrect information being put out. Because if we win that case, it will be huge. And there is no reason for the county to even vote tomorrow. But they are deciding to vote. They could wait till September, which is what we're asking. Peter Kahn, do you want to speak to some of the other legal issues that you have been raising for months?
Absolutely. Thank you, Theodora. Hold on, let me turn off my own. Sorry about that. Theodora, thank you so much for having me this afternoon and for this excellent conference that you're putting on. I found the discussion of the health issues extremely interesting and very helpful. I wanted to speak to one of the legal issues that comes out of this. And that is that a number of the council members, let me introduce myself. My name is Peter Kahn. I'm a retired attorney. I live in Montgomery County, Maryland. A number of members of the county council have been relying on what they call a legal mandate as their reason for adopting this measure. They tell us that we understand some of the policy problems, the health problems and the other issues, but we have no choice. We have to adopt this as a matter of federal law. Our hands are tied by the federal courts and the relevant federal statutes. I just want to say that this is one of the many incorrect statements that the council has used in the course of their debates over this proposed measure. They are wrong about the alleged legal mandate. That alleged mandate simply does not exist. That mandate that they believe exists comes from a recently decided case on the West Coast in the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. In that case, the Ninth Circuit applied a standard in interpreting the 1996 Telecom Act, which some members of the council claim requires us to adopt the same standard that was used in that case. And therefore, in their view, we must allow the telecoms not just to meet exactly those standards, but to allow the telecoms to place their antennas and wireless facilities literally anywhere they please in the county within narrow limits. This argument fails on at least three grounds. First, it's a ridiculous and extravagant, overstated interpretation of the Ninth Circuit ruling, which in itself would not require any such thing. The Ninth Circuit made it clear that there are limits and there are matters that must be demonstrated by a telecom that wants to place telecom facilities. They must demonstrate certain things before they can prevail against a jurisdiction that wants to not grant them a permit to do so. So it's a ridiculous interpretation of the Ninth Circuit ruling. Second, obviously, we do not live in the Ninth Circuit. Montgomery County, as the members of the county council are no doubt aware, is in the state of Maryland, and Maryland is governed by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, not the Ninth. The Ninth Circuit does not make decisions for the entire United States. Only the Supreme Court does. Thus, their decision does not bind us. How they made the leap from the ruling of the Ninth Circuit to that of the Fourth Circuit is simply beyond me. I do not understand how they did that. And third, since we live in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, the Fourth Circuit has long upheld a standard that is shared by virtually all of the federal circuits across the country in interpreting the 1996 Telecom Act that is much less forgiving of telecoms in their efforts to receive permits from local governments for the placement, construction, or modification of cell service facilities, a standard that in fact would be very protective of local jurisdictions in their efforts in their decisions as to whether to allow cell facilities in any location. The Fourth Circuit standard mandates that a cell service facility receive a permit only if two factors are met. First, there has to be an absolute absence of cell service in that particular location. And secondly, there must be an absence of any reasonable alternative site. And that neither of those standards can be met very easily in Montgomery County. First, as to the first factor, that is an absolute absence of cell service in that location, there are going to be very, very few locations in the county that really do meet that standard. The coverage maps of all three of the major cell service providers, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, shows that essentially all of the county has abundant cell service. The coverage maps are literally glowing with cell service, showing cell service coverage. Thus, the first factor fails. Almost any jurisdiction in the county, except in perhaps some rare and out-of-the-way locations, will be able to deny a permit to a telecom to place a cell service facility in the location, in that location, will have no problem in doing so. As to the second factor, that is the absence of any reasonable alternative site, again, this will be very, very hard to demonstrate. The Fed committee of the Montgomery County Council itself has demonstrated that there are literally tens of thousands of available poles in the county. They think that this is wonderful, that this will allow us to place tens of thousands of cell sites and allow the telecoms to place them wherever they want. On the contrary, those poles represent the very reasonable alternative sites that the Fourth Circuit requires. Thus, in my view, and I think this is a very clear interpretation, thus it will be extremely hard for any telecom seeking a permit to place a cell facility to receive a permit that's denied by a local jurisdiction, because they simply will not be able to meet the Fourth Circuit standards. Thus, the council members' claims that they must adopt the ZTA to comply with the law is simply a fallacy, even, I would say, a pretext for doing what they want to do on other grounds. Our county, along with much of the rest of the county, places meaningful limits on the placement and construction of wireless facilities. And there is literally nothing about the county's existing setbacks and mandates that violates federal law, and thus there is no mandate on the county council to change that law. Thank you very much. Theodora?
Thank you so much, Peter. Anita Prince. Oh, unmute.
I'm Anita Prince. I'm a ESOL teacher in Montgomery County, and I'm appealing to the council today to make a decision to protect all children. This is an experiment on our children, and it disproportionately will affect brown and Black children, because our children are the ones that are on the street corners waiting for buses. They wait for buses to travel because they're not in cars. They will be exposed to these poles disproportionately, and they will possibly have these poles erected in public schools near their facilities. I think this idea that this 5G coverage is somehow going to close the equity gap is outrageous. And we all know that the gap is because of money and has very little to do with coverage. The coverage in Montgomery County, as I understand it, is very good. So Black and brown people do not need this 5G. We will be asked, though, to bear the unknown and possible negative health effects disproportionately. And brown and Black people are done being experiments. We're tired of being experiments for other people who want to buy $500 and $600 phones. It's enough. It's enough. The council needs to make decisions for all residents and protect all the residents. I'm an African-American woman, and I'm outraged. This decision is being made while people are unaware. This is like a sneaky, underhanded move while people are just coming out of the pandemic.
Thank you, Anita. For people who would like to add more, I have some points that are being raised. Professor Benishai, you wanted to mention something about the company's publicity and perhaps their marketing?
Yeah, I think it's really, really indicative to look at a company's marketing, how it's pushing 5G, and in particular, what it is not pushing. I know that 5G, especially at the higher levels, is pushed to be the great new thing in the Internet of Things, to make interconnectivity happen, to be a great server for the public good, and in particular for industry and for commerce, and to be the big boost. This is actually a fallacy. People on the inside of the cell phone industry will tell you that there's absolutely no business to business marketing plan in the cell phone industry today. It is entirely directed to consumer, and the consumer being the person who will buy that $500 phone. What this really means is that the additional infrastructure that will come by the densification that is necessary for 5G will incur far, far, far greater costs. It will eat a lot of much more electricity. Someone's going to have to pay for this. And because there is no business to business plan in the cell phone industry today, and I would dearly love to see one of the cell phone companies prove me wrong, it simply means that this will be paid for by $1,000 phones. This will be paid for by the richer of the neighborhoods. And most likely, the brunt of maintenance will fall somehow onto the general public, the public itself. So there is an untold untruth in how they're pushing and marketing what 5G is going to give us. It will not actually help in connectivity at all. It won't really push forward commerce, except of course, the commerce of selling phones made in China to people in America. It won't really, in my mind, increase productivity any more than existing 4G networks actually do. It will be a massive drain on the community because someone's going to have to pay for all that. And with regards to the last speaker's point about the disproportionate exposure to the poor neighborhoods and to the poor people, yeah, most definitely. This is not a friendly technology. The Chinese, I think it was economics minister, described 5G as an immature technology. And he's absolutely right. There is nothing particularly positive in what 5G can give us. The existing 4G, by the way, the proper name of 4G is LTE, long-term evolution. It was a system designed to undergo constant change and constant upgrade. 5G is just simply a way to sell more phones. Thank you. That was the point I wanted to make.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything? I'm hoping that Anita Prince will be able to come back on. Does anyone want to add anything before we go? Yeah, thank you so much. Oh,
Yeah, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I ask that those who are hopefully listening from the council will take the time to look at our website at ehtrust.org, where among other things, we have YouTube videos and slides showing what these so-called small cells can look like. In poorer neighborhoods, they put them up with lots of ugly wires and big boxes. And in wealthier neighborhoods, they design them so that they look like they fit right into modern street lamps in Georgetown, for example. But I think what Anita Prince was saying was so spot on. And I see she's joined us again. So let's let her have the last word. And
Okay.
Nicole has something to add. Sorry. Yes.
I need my
Nicole?
video turned on, please.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay, try it now.
Yeah,
Great,
okay,
perfect. Okay.
yes. And I feel that this is being rushed and that the council has a responsibility to the Montgomery County citizens. Many of us who've taken the vaccines and are getting back with our families and loved ones now, and we are not just paying attention. This is like we're being sideswiped. And this is so important. So many of us are been essential workers, and this new technology will expose us to a hazard that we're unaware of. That we have bus drivers, cab drivers, people who work in communities where it's high density businesses, and these are mostly brown and Black people. And we are going to be exposed unaware of this danger and hazard to our health and our families. I implore the council to consider the equity issues and of this unknown, untested new technology. Don't experiment with our lives. Consider one child or 2 children, even 3 children to die unnecessarily because we did not make a conscious decision to try to protect them. You look at your children, look them in the eyes. Do you want them to be possibly harmed? And you won't know the effects until maybe 5 or 6 years from now. I know that the council is considering insurance to insure themselves. Well, there's no insurance against the guilt or conscience that you might have, knowing that you made a decision that infected and possibly harmed so many people. There's no insurance for that. So please, I urge you, you're hearing from well-informed people who believe in science. We're asking you to make a decision based on science. Take the science. We've had enormous developments to saving people's lives all over the world because of science. Let's use science now to be cautious as we move forward and use technology safely to benefit our lives, just like X-rays, marvelous invention, but dangerous at certain exposure levels. Is this possible too with 5G? We don't know. It's unknown. We need to know. The public deserves to know. We, the people of Montgomery County, deserve to know. Do not betray us. Do not betray children. Do not betray the vulnerable. Brown and Black and young children, we are vulnerable. Do not do this. I implore you. Please consider what you're doing. It impacts so many people. This permanent, massive infrastructure change, the public deserves to know and have a say. Wait until you hear from people, everyone who has a right to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole?
Yeah, just want to add, as far as the political pawns, like, stop, to the council, please stop, making this all about Black and brown and immigrants and bridging the digital divide. It's not right. You're just using us. That's a talking point, because all of us, Black, brown, everything in between, white, whatever, we have come to you with very valid points, and you're not listening to us. So if you don't take the time to inform this community that you claim to want to help, then you're not being genuine. They don't know what's going on. And so you're speaking, for them, when people should be able to make informed decisions so they can speak for themselves, and you won't even have a public hearing. So we really, you really need to look at the actions that you're putting forward, because it speaks volumes to your characters. So, we'll know tomorrow, who's going to vote what. But right now, it's just very disappointing to live in an amazing county. I moved to Montgomery County from Howard County. So I'm used to what I'm used to. But to have a government that is operating in this fashion is extremely disappointing. I chose this house because I want to live here. I had my pros and cons, and now you're adding a con after the fact. I'm not happy with that at all. Super disappointed. So again, as Anita said, take a minute, step back and listen to us and stop listening to the telecom. They have their own interests. It's been laid out. We're the ones that live here. We're the important people. And, you know, many of us, we're taking the time to manage our health, you know, eat right, exercise, and do all these things. You're going to put something that's going to bear down on us that we're not going to be able to defend ourselves from. It's just not right. So again, take the time and really listen to what we have to say. We wouldn't be putting in all this effort and energy if it didn't really matter to us. We elected you. Just remember that. We elected you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to get on the record that the city of Tacoma Park wrote a letter in opposition to this ZTA. The town of Somerset opposed ZTA 1907 as a sweeping change. It would vociferate the opportunity for planning staff review. The mayor of Garrett Park requested that the council work with municipalities before proceeding. The village of Martin Additions wrote last week asking for the vote to be postponed due to all of the issues that have been raised. And again, as has been stated, there is no reason that they have to vote tomorrow. They can wait until after the recess. But for some reason, they're choosing to ram this forward. In addition, the West Montgomery County Citizens Association, well known to care for the environment, which I will be on the board, also sent a letter stating that they oppose this because the council should work with community leaders and local officials and residents to draft legislation that balances aesthetic and quality of life concerns of the residents with the commercial desires of the applicants. And contrary to Council Reamer's safety assurances, over 400 scientists and doctors from 35 countries have issued an appeal calling to halt this rollout. So does anyone else have anything else before we close? And yes, this will be available online and we will be getting it out so that our media can hopefully cover it and give us a voice as well. But anyone else before I close?
Let me just add that democracy rests on the freely given consent of the governed. People cannot consent to what they do not know. And as been eloquently stated by Ms. Williams and Ms. Prince, people have information now that makes them very concerned. That information comes from scientists. Dr. Benny Shai and I are among 400 scientists that have called for a moratorium on 5G until we have more information. I would urge you not to undermine democracy in this important county. People come to Montgomery County attracted by your better schools, your higher quality of life. And what you may do here is to negatively affect your own quality of life because you have rushing through with information that is not correct. And I hope that you will look seriously at the record that has been submitted to you here, that you'll look at our website for more information. And we're happy to provide more information. And frankly, I think it's rather unfortunate that you have chosen not to hold a full public hearing. And I want to thank Theodora Scarrato and all the organizations with whom she's working because they are calling for more public information, and that is what democracy demands. Thank you very much.
Thank you.